Uh, so Jen, I don't know. I think maybe they're getting people's hopes up a little bit now. Um, the way Trump's, communicating with people, he's used this term aspirational. I say aspirational things. Um, should people be getting their hopes up that we're getting closer to getting out, or is there some way they should stay calm and coping?
I think that we should, um, I think we should just stay where we are for a while. They are just starting the conversation this week about recovery and reentry into the economy and whatnot. But as I've been listening to Governor Cuomo for the state of New York, it sounds like they're going to move very slowly, very, very slowly, to prevent any sort of resurgence of the virus because the virus is still going to be out there. It's invisible, but it's still out there. And there's always that risk that it could resurge. So I think people should just not get too excited just yet and probably expect at least another 2 to 4 weeks, at least for New York, of doing what we're doing now.
Well, maybe I know they said that they're going to step stage into the reopening, but maybe New York, of course, is probably going to be towards the latter end because we got hit the hardest, but and we're the
Mhm.
most dense. But maybe just seeing other states reopening will help keep people's positivity up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as we see other parts of the nation opening up, it's going to instill some hope and maybe help us see the end of this, at least the end of the quarantining. But again, let's see it roll out. Don't get too excited just yet. Don't start planning parties. Don't start booking things and whatnot. I would still just stay steady where we are for now.
Um, how do people that are taking it a little harder than that already, maybe getting a little more depressed? I lost my job. I can't go out. I don't have any, skills that I can do from home. How are people coping, and how should they cope if they're getting down on this stuff?
Yeah, yeah. People are, eh, we're, I think, 6 weeks, almost 6 weeks in now at this point, and people are very depressed. I think I shared with you last week that I've been doing frequent assessments for some of my patients being suicidal or having suicidal ideation. Again, this week I'm seeing more of that. Um, People are feeling hopeless. They're feeling depressed, anxious. They're feeling, all the things that are normal when you're going through a pandemic, through a disaster. So, yeah, it's a lot more of the same. I know people are anxiously waiting for those stimulus checks to arrive. I know there a lot of people are really counting on them. So, it's just people are living in a chronic state of anxiety. And, unfortunately, they manifested in many different ways. So, I'll even share with you guys. My Easter Sunday was not that great. After Jesse got his basket in the morning, I was feeling anxious, so I decided to start cleaning because that's what I do when I'm anxious is I clean. So I decided to go over to my bar area. I have a beautiful piece of furniture that has all my wine glasses and champagne glasses. Sure enough, I wasn't paying attention, and half of the glasses fell onto me and shattered on my hand. And yeah, that was the end of Easter for us. So, you know, we're getting in trouble with even the ways we're trying to cope.
Right, right.
So
Well, you know what? Some religions say, breaking glass is good luck. So maybe it was the start of something good for you,
I was just glad I didn't have to go to the emergency room. My husband, he was in the military, so he's very good with first aid and whatnot, and he bandaged me up, and I was good to go. But it was my anxiety. Had I not been cleaning because of my anxiety, something that didn't need to be cleaned, I probably would have had a better Easter. But I think too, I want to say that since Easter Sunday, this past week, we've been seeing a lot of tension and frustration in our government with the cast of characters on the task force team and whatnot. So I had some thoughts that I wanted to share with you on
Please.
maybe things they could have done better or maybe things they could do going forward that I think would help minimize some of the anxiety for people and minimize confusion. Um, I know that over the weekend, I believe Mayor de Blasio had stated that he was going to close all of the city schools from now until the end of the school year. And
Right.
within minutes, Governor Cuomo had canceled out that announcement and said, no, that's not what we're doing. Well, why would you do that? Why not have that discussion and then make an announcement later? So I saw a surge of people's anxiety go up over that. And then, of course, people, once they heard the city was going to close, then they knew that Long Island was most likely going to be right behind them. I also we saw the disagreement this week from President Trump and the governors as to who has the final say and the authority on reopening the states. I believe that caused a lot of may have caused a lot of angst for people as well. And can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, no,
That,
I'm letting you go. You're giving people good info here. I want to hear about it. I'm always
so
accused of talking too much. So when I have an expert like you talking about things I want people to learn about, I'm trying to teach myself to be mindful, like you teach me, and I'm trying to be mindful to shut up sometimes.
I love hearing you talk. You make me laugh. Anywho, so seeing some of the disagreements this past week with our political officials, that was not comforting, and a lot of it was unnecessary to have on the world stage. And one thing became very clear to me. Oh, let me just go back too. I also wanted to say that I was able to watch the presser on, I believe that it was Monday or Tuesday, where President Trump gave it to the fake news and showed them a montage of his decisions and the agreements of his decisions and the support he's gotten for his decisions. I thought, good job, good for him. And, I want to say that after I saw that, I realized one of the mistakes that I think Donald made, and it's not even too late to, to correct it, is why didn't they put an emergency management professional on the task force or at the least on the podium at his, nightly press conference to discuss um, the industry of emergency management and disaster. And then that person would have been able to explain the disaster cycle and the policy and procedures that are appropriate to do in each phase of preparedness, response, and recovery.
I
Um,
think they have,
and
they have the FEMA, the head of FEMA is on there. They have the Surgeon General on there. They had, multiple military members engaged in it. I would think all these people are trained in the protocols. I don't, maybe they need
trained,
some
but
kind of
not
special
once.
master or something.
They are trained, but not once did any of them step forward and say, hey, wait, this is normal procedure, or nobody ever cross-referenced the decision that Donald made about something like, say, such as the ventilators, and cross-referenced it into the disaster industry to say that this is policy and procedure. So I wish that they would have had somebody every day to stop and explain, and to explain the sociology of disaster and the human behavior that happens in disaster. I mean, let's go back to the toilet paper. How nice would it have been to have a disaster professional up there to say, look, this is part of human behavior in a disaster, to want to hoard or protect your own to survive. Who knew that it was going to be toilet paper? That wouldn't have been my first choice. But anyway.
I guess that way, but how does that happen, Jen? It just happens to be like one thing, the word gets out that, hey, they're running low on toilet paper and everybody runs out for toilet paper? Like what? There's no, I'm still yet to read one thing of why. Why toilet paper?
Had this happened, 50 years ago, I don't know that toilet paper would have been the thing that everybody ran for. But the point is, if somebody had gotten up on the podium and said, there is no need to go and buy all that toilet paper, which you're feeling is normal, but there's no need to go and cause a toilet paper crisis. The other thing I want to say too, I don't know if you've noticed in the news and on social media, people are being shamed for taking off their gloves, their plastic gloves, and throwing them into the parking lot after they go food shopping or whatever they do. And people are being shamed
I know. What are they supposed to? I guess you're supposed to bring another bag to put the dirty gloves in the bag and bring it home. I know what you're saying. I mean, you could probably find a garbage can, but it's like tricky because you got to walk up to your car with the gloves, open it, then take the gloves off, I guess put them in your car, and if there's something on them, it travels around with you. It's weird.
People are being shamed for littering when what I suspect is going on are that people are so anxious by those gloves that they just want to take them off wherever they're standing and throw them off. And when you're anxious, you don't care about who has to clean up after the mess you've made with your anxiety. So again, I mean, if there were disaster people more visible, disaster professionals more visible, standing alongside Donald Trump and the task force team to explain a lot of this, then I think that would have minimized confusion for people. It would have decreased, I'm sure, Donald's stress. I'm so afraid that poor man's going to have a heart attack on us. And also, too, we all know which networks are hanging on for Donald to just say or do what they think is the wrong thing. And then they go on with their own narrative about it. Yep. So that's the reflection I had this week, was that if somebody had just been there in a disaster profession to explain along the way, then they would have, I think people would have understood more, and it would have created less anxiety, less anger, and would have maybe eased the stress levels for the administration.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this, because one of the things that I'm finding even myself is, number one, the press briefings, I think it's good for the president to get out in front of it every day. Mm-hmm. I feel like, they should be more structured. Like, president says something, the doctor says something, the surgeon general, the attorney, whoever has to talk, little Q&A, and it's over. And I feel like the president's getting drawn into it by taking so much Q&A, and then he's raising people's anxiety because he's yelling at reporters in the room who are trying to flip the narrative on him. So maybe if he toned it down to just the facts, here's what it is, maybe that would help people too, rather than seeing the guy they support out there sparring against the media of the world every single day.
So you're thinking if Donald doesn't indulge the media with the responses, or is it that you're
No,
thinking,
I'm saying I think he said what he had to say the other day. He called it out. He put it on the screen. You're saying I didn't do anything. Here's what I did. Boom, boom, boom. In your own words. Boom, boom, boom. But I think now he could be the better man and say, he's not going to engage in that stuff and say, these are the numbers. This is how it's working. We're doing a great job. That's for Dr. Fauci. That's for Dr. Birx. That's for this one, that one. Mike Pence, the head of the corona. Here you go. Q&A. That's not my question. Ask me something else. You know what I mean? He could probably tone it down a little in the anger department with them and maybe help people feel a little better too, because the press ain't going to stop.
no, no, they're not. And if we look at President Trump, he's so stressed out. I can't even imagine what's going on behind closed doors. And all of us, from the president down to, me here, right in my little home in Huntington, Long Island, the stress level is larger than anything I remember feeling, quite honestly. So he's when he yells at the press, that's his way of venting the frustration. And really, all somebody has to do is look at him the wrong way, and he is kind of exploding. But you're right. I mean, if he could tone it down, it would probably be helpful. But also, we have to remember Donald's a fighter, and that's one of the reasons he was elected, was because he's a fighter, and he won't stop. He will fight to the death. And so I don't see him backing off of the angry responses. But if they put an additional person there to answer some of these questions, then perhaps that could help. But I think there are a lot of questions not being answered. And the minute Donald says something that seems, harsh, then it just causes a stir and it becomes the headline. So,
Yeah, I know.
so anyway,
I
so
know.
Donald, if you're listening,
No, I'm listening. I'm letting you go. I'm letting you go. I'm trying not to interrupt, but the thing, many people aren't talking about is for the amount of, they say, well, we have the most deaths and we have the highest this and the highest that. Out of the whole world, we have the lowest death ratio. The lowest of the whole world, with per cases and deaths per capita. We're the lowest percentage in the whole world. So, somewhere in there, I think if the administration just puts the binary numbers out there, like here's how we're doing against the rest of the world, folks, they could achieve the goal by talking to people's brains instead of, ratcheting up the rhetoric. You know what I mean?
He's doing a good job. And not one person went, especially in New York, went without a ventilator.
Yeah, right.
So,
And the other thing, right, one of the other things that Trump has been saying is, I gave them everything they asked for. They said they were going to need 30,000 or 40,000. It never even got to that number, and they have them. And we have more than enough now. So, he's giving the media these other things to blow up about when the facts are all in his favor, which I think is great.
can I say one thing about the ventilator discussion? See, this is where I wish I could have said to Donald, okay, I wish you didn't say that. What he was doing when they were talking about the ventilators is something called a rapid risk assessment. And that's during the response phase of the cycle, the disaster cycle. Yep. And that's when they're trying to figure out what they need, what kind of equipment they need for whatever the disaster is. And it's not a one-time conversation. It's something that can happen, as needed from hour to hour. So Donald had said at one of the press conferences that he really needed to factor in how many states were asking for more than what they needed, who was maybe hoarding. Hoarding is a normal human behavior during a disaster, not just in the individual, but in an institution, in the hospitals, so on and so forth. So he wasn't wrong that they have to factor in the hoarding when they're doing a disaster, a rapid disaster. I'm sorry, a rapid risk assessment for equipment. He was not wrong. Did
Right.
he need to say it? Because then the media went crazy with him talking about the hospital's hoarding.
Yeah. I
So
know it. I know it. I know it. I always feel like his message is great, and his messaging sometimes just goes like one step too far that he didn't need to do, and that may contribute. But overall, like I said, the proof's in the pudding. We got the lowest death percentage ratio in the world, so he's doing something right overall, Jen.
hmm
Yep.
he is. He is.
All right. Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You're the best. You're always so calm and soothing. And I was listening the whole time, but I was also trying to let your message get out there, and the message is great.
One more thing. I just want to extend it again to your audience that if anybody is struggling emotionally, if they reach out to me via email, I could either, help them or help link them to people who may need help. So I just want to continue to be a resource for the audience.